Hey guys, this is how to tackle homework number 1.4, question 17, otherwise known as the wind chill question. I have a lot of people asking me about this, and I am not surprised in the slightest. It does look very spooky, but when we break it down and see what it's actually asking us to do, it's actually quite simple. Okay, so first off, let's take a look at what the question's actually saying. It looks like we've got wind speed that is broken up into a piecewise function based on v. All right, what does V represent? V is the wind speed. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this red. I'm sure you guys have figured out by now that I love my color coding. And I'll also notice that inside this wind chill piecewise function, I know my variable is V because that's what it's telling me over here. The conditions are all based on. So I know my variable is actually V. However, you'll notice I also have T floating around. T is also a variable, except you'll notice that T represents temperature, and for all of the questions, they've given me the same temperature. So for part A, it says the wind chill, find the wind chill for an air temperature of 10 degrees Celsius. So what this really means is instead of T, I should actually have 10. Right? So they're telling me the air temperature is going to be 10 degrees Celsius. And that's true for all of the questions. So it's kind of like a dummy variable where I have a letter in here, but I'm not actually changing T at all, right? I'm changing V. V is what matters. V is the wind speed. T is just supposed to be 10, but they called it T. Okay, and they're telling me that I need to vary the wind speed. So for part A, it's asking me about 0.75. Your numbers may be different, but the point is each part is saying choose a different wind speed, right? So let's take a look at part A. First off, I need to ask myself, since this is going to be my V, which piece should I be using? Where does 0.7 belong? 0.75 belong? Which piece does it satisfy? I usually tend to start from the top one. I ask myself, does my 0.75 belong to this? And I would say, yes, it does. So I would say 0.75 is between 0 and 1.77. So I should use the top piece. So my first question is, what part of the piecewise function am I in? Right? And it turns out I'm just in the top piece. So the part that matters is the top. So I'm going to take my 0.75, whoopsie, and plug that in for V, except my top piece is just T, right? And this is supposed to be, excuse me, this is supposed to be 10, according to my question, right? So actually real quick, just before I move on any further, I'm going to actually go ahead and replace that. Everywhere I see a T, I'm instead going to replace it by 10 because I know that it's actually supposed to be 10, right? So I'm plugging in 0.75 for V, but I don't have any V's to replace. My answer is just 10. Okay, and also I'm going to simplify this because I'm noticing 33 minus 10. I can actually do that. That would give me 23. And now if I really wanted to, I could actually simplify this as well. I'm just going to take this, throw it into a calculator, and tell me what kind of number it is. So according to my calculator, this ends up being negative 3.7034. So the only spooky piece left is just this middle part. And unfortunately, there's not much else I can do about this middle part. It just kind of has to be like that. And I just realized I have an extra parentheses here. So my first piece is just 10. My last piece is just this negative 3.7 number. It's my middle piece. That's the spooky one. Okay. So let's take a look at part B. This time my air temperature is still 10, so I'm still using this one. I'm not changing that, but I am plugging in a different V. So instead of 0.75, I need to ask myself, where am I going to plug in 11? Where does 11 belong? Where does 11 belong? Well, this first top piece, it stops at 1.77. 11 is way bigger, so I need to move on. This one is 1.77 all the way up to 20. That's where 11 belongs. 11 is in between 1.77 and 20. So I should use the middle piece. All right, so this one's the spooky one, but that's okay. We'll get through it. All right, so my W, I'm going to plug in 11 for V. So everywhere I see a V, I need to instead replace it by 11. So this is going to be an 11 here. This is going to be an 11 here. And this looks absolutely hideous, but that's all right. We are allowed to use a calculator. And we're fully expected to use a calculator here because there's no way you'd be able to solve this by hand for right now. The best you could do would be like an approximation. So real quick, I'm going to throw this up on another screen and throw this into a calculator. So just be careful when you punch this in using your own calculator because it's very easy to mess up and type in a minus where you shouldn't have one and get a completely wrong answer. So just be very careful when you type these numbers into the calculator. And here's my calculator result. And when I simplify this, it gives me 31.52. So I'm going to say this is approximately 31.52, just rounding to 2 decimal places. I can't remember which it is off the top of my head for Pearson, what they want this answer to be, but 2 decimal places is probably fine for right now. Go to more if you need more. If it wants like a closed form solution, this is just the closed form solution. So you'd have to carefully type this in. There's a little more simplifying you might be able to do, like you could combine minus 11 and the 10.45, but I wouldn't bother. Okay, so next up, same question, except I need to plug in 31 for V. So I'm going to copy paste this wording. I would ask myself, where does the 31 belong? Where does 31 live? And I'm sure we can imagine, I use the first piece, I use the second piece. This one's probably the third piece. And that intuition is right on the money because I use the third piece for V is bigger than 20. 31 is bigger than 20. So I should use the top, or sorry, the bottom piece, right? Because this one was top, middle, now this one's bottom, right? So I'm going to go ahead and use the bottom piece. And I need to plug in 31 in for V. So I have W of 31, except my bottom piece doesn't even have any V's in it. There's nothing for me to plug in. So my answer is just that. My answer is just negative 3.7034. And that is it. So it looks very spooky. Admittedly, the middle piece does require a calculator and it looks awful, and your result is awful, but the question is actually pretty straightforward. I need to take my V and plug it into the right spot and simplify. The only caveat is they threw in this extra T variable specifically to confuse you, but all that is, T is temperature. They told you they wanted the temperature to be 10, so you just throw in 10 everywhere you see a T. All right, so this is how you tackle the wind chill question.